Good morning, everybody. Hope you enjoyed some of that scenery on the way in. Today we're in Southwest Virginia on the Blue Ridge Parkway at mile marker 176, and we are stopping to take a tour of the historic Mabry Mill. This was a grist mill, sawmill that was established in the early 1900s and has now become one of the most popular and most photographed spots on the entire Blue Ridge Parkway. We're here early on a Saturday morning, and as you can see, we are literally the only people in the parking lot, so we have the whole place to ourselves. So let's go and take a look and see what's happening at the grist mill. As you can see, we're here early on a Saturday morning, and we are literally the only people here. We're the only car in the parking lot. Here's the craft or gift shop and the restaurant, which is not open. It's only open, I think, seasonally. But this is the parking area for the Mabry Mill, right off of the Blue Ridge Parkway, mile post 176. This is looking south on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And if we spin around and up this way towards the mill, that is going north on the parkway, and there's the mill, so we're going to go and take a look at that. Okay, the mill was built here in 1910 by Ed Mabry, who was a jack of all trades. He'd been a chair maker, a miner for a coal company, a blacksmith, and a farmer. And his wife Lizzie operated the mill here until 1936, grinding corn and sawing lumber. That was a hard life back then, but man, they put a lot of work into this place, and it is beautiful. So one of the signs that I just read says that down this path we're going to find multiple buildings and farm implements and other displays that document rural life in Appalachia over a period of about 100 years. Most of these were restored and arranged here during the 1940s and 50s. These displays illustrate aspects of mountain life that were colorful, but not unique to Appalachia. If you grew up in other areas of rural America, you may recognize some of these things that you will see here. Here's a nice view of the mill and the little stream that goes underneath of the parkway. This is viewing south on the parkway. And here is the grist mill building itself. Let's go over and take a look at the sign and see what we can learn from the sign. Okay, it says this was a versatile mill. There were 3 sections. The center section, which was the grist mill. The section to the left here was the sawmill, and the section all the way down here at the end was actually a woodworking shop. At the grist mill, the customer would pour shelled corn into the hopper on the top. Large, carefully grooved millstones, separated by fractions of an inch, sheared the kernels. The miller checked the texture of the meal as it entered the bin and could adjust the distance between the millstones if necessary. The customer paid a total of 12.5 cents per bushel, or 1/8 of their total crop. Here are some of the millstones that were used in the grist mill. They're made from quartz, and they were quarried from a quarry nearby in Blacksburg, Virginia. It says that they were shaped at the quarry, but the miller dressed or sharpened them with homemade chisels here on site to make them fit into the grist mill here. The grist mill operator also had a second set of millstones that would grind or chop the corn into a coarser product that was used for livestock feed. These are some of the troughs that Ed Mabry created to divert the water from a couple of creeks nearby to funnel the water into the main race here, which then turned the water wheel down next to the building to turn the stones for the grinding of the corn, and also to run the sawmill. A lot of work put into this. During rainy weather, when the water supply to the mill increased, Mabry operated his sawmill. A sliding carriage transported the logs past the circular saw. Like the grist mill, the saw was powered by belts and shafts connected to the water wheel. And once the logs were run through the sawmill, they had to be stacked and dried. So this is the method that they used to dry the lumber to prevent it from checking and cracking. Never seen a drying method like this. What I've seen typically is the boards are laid flat with slats in between them to let the air circulate and dry them, but I guess this is the method that they used in the area here in Southern Virginia. Okay, they even had a blacksmith shop here on site. Obviously it's not open yet this morning, but let's see if we can take a look in here. It says that it was vital to the home industry. Uncle Ed cleverly fashioned wagon tires, andirons, tools, and various other iron objects for himself and for his neighbors. So we can take a peek in here. I believe during the summer they actually have someone in here forging iron and giving demonstrations to the visitors. Here's some of the old farm equipment. Here's an old wagon that they would have used, a plow to turn the fields. Another plow up here, and maybe this might have been some kind of hopper to actually plant the seed. I think that's what this is. Kind of a crude wheelbarrow that they might have fashioned to drop the seeds in to the ground. There's a little plow to cut a trough to drop the seeds in. Pretty cool. Okay, back here in Appalachia, they had to make everything themselves, so this was how they actually made soap. They'd hollow out a log and fill it with water to produce lye, and add some fat to the lye and boil it until they got some homemade soap out of it. And here's the pot that they would have used to boil the lye to create the soap. Again, ingenious for back in the old days in Appalachia, but they had to do what they had to do. Although operating a grist mill was never easy, Ed Mabry faced special challenges at this location. For one, the quantity of water which turned the overshot wheel and powered all of the equipment in the mill was barely adequate. To increase his supply, he built separate flumes or wooden troughs to catch the runoff from two small streams. These fed into the single trough called a race directly in front of you. In later years, Mabry's health failed and he stopped maintaining the water wheel and flumes. To furnish the power for the mill, he bought an 8-horsepower engine and his wife Lizzie took over the mill operations. By the time Ed died and Lizzie moved away in the mid-1930s, the grist mills were becoming obsolete. This is another portion of the diversion that Ed Mabry had to create to bring the water down to the mill. He had to dig this channel out here that went way back up into the hills here to divert the water from the stream and allow it to come down and operate the mill. The view of the mill from the opposite side. On the water wheel, which looks like it is in need of some repair, so that is why it is not running at this moment. Big section missing out of top. Kind of a shame. Hoping to see it operating, but not today. Appalachian Houses. More than a century ago, log cabins were common in sight in Appalachia and in other rural areas of eastern United States. Samuel and Elizabeth Matthews built this cabin near Galax, Virginia in 1869. It's made largely of oak and has one room on each of its 2 floors. Over time, they installed a wood stove and added a bedroom, metal roof, and weatherboarding. In 1956, the cabin was donated to the National Park Service, and workers carefully restored the structure to its earlier appearance when they moved it to the site. Because there were so many small sawmills, framed houses were also common in Appalachia. The Mabrys built their home on this site in about 1914. They used boards and chestnut paneling sawed at their own sawmill and workshop. On this 2-story log home, you can see the holes in the side of the building there that indicate that that's the floor joist for the 2nd floor. And if you look really closely, some of the beams up here, you can actually see some of the marks from when they were hewing the logs. Everything was done by hand back then, and Took some craftsmanship and a lot of patience and hard work to put these buildings together. It looks like they use some dovetail joinery here on the corners to hold the buildings together, and a field stone fireplace that they would have just gathered the stone from the surrounding area and built their chimney. Pretty short door leading into the place. I'm going to set up the tripod and stand next to it, and I'll show you how short this door is. Okay, yep, these are some short doors. I'm 5'10", and this is probably about 5'4", so you're definitely ducking to get into the house. So what we're looking at here is called a bark mill. This was used by the tanner. It was a horse-powered machine that was used to grind oak and hemlock bark for tanning. I guess the horse would be attached to the one end there, and they would walk in circles while they ground the bark, which produced bark liquor, and that was used for tanning hides. All right, walking down the path here, come to a site that has an old whiskey still. If you saw my previous video on the whiskey still up in Catoctin, Maryland, you can take a look at that. I'll put a link in the video. But this tells you a little bit about how they made the whiskey here. And yeah, these were pretty common in Appalachia back in the day. This looks pretty similar to the one we saw in Maryland. Many of the early settlers brought with them the knowledge and custom of making whiskey. Although tax laws and for a while prohibition made the activity illegal, moonshiners have always operated in the mountains of the South. Converting corn to liquor has several advantages: convenient and compact to store and easy to transport. It also provided a vital cash income. The display that we see here in front of us tells us and shows us how sorghum molasses was made, as it became very popular during the Civil War, when supplies of sugar and corn syrup were interrupted. The sorghum mill that we see in front of us is where the process began. A horse or a mule, hitched to a sweep of about 10 feet long, would walk in a circle, turning the rollers of the sorghum mill. As stalks were fed through the rotating rollers, the extracted bright green juice would pass through a cloth strainer and into a barrel. After the juice was collected, it was cooked for several hours in an evaporator or boiler box, similar to the one here. As the syrup would thicken and turn to a caramel color, watchful cooks skim the dark foam that forms on the surface. When the batch reaches its desired consistency, it is strained and bottled or canned. All right, here's another example of another wagon that they would have used. This would have been used to haul logs down from the hillside. This is a much longer wagon, would have been horse-drawn, and they would have used this to bring the logs down to the sawmill for processing. Okay, I think that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed that. Way more information and displays and buildings than I imagined when I first got here. It's definitely worth the stop. If you're going down the Blue Ridge Parkway, I would definitely make this a must-see. Hopefully, maybe if you come in the summertime, the buildings will be open and maybe some of the demonstrations will be going on, and you could even get ice cream while you're here. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. You learned a little something about life in Appalachia. It was pretty cool that we literally had the entire place to ourselves. I have not seen one other person here, so I really enjoyed that. But I will come back in the summer when things are open and kind of revisit some of the displays. So hopefully you like this. If there's anything that you want to add in the comments down below, please do so. Also, please consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up on the video if you liked it. And like I always say, you never know what you're going to see when you get out and explore with John.